But I'm delighted that Cheryl's launching this briefings series. Cheryl comes to us from Australia, as you would have seen from the chat in the chat panel there. So we appreciate Cheryl's coming and staying up late for us, coming from the evening in Melbourne, Australia. Thank you. Cheryl is a digital learning strategist, which sounds very exciting and forward-looking for an organisation called Fusion GC that look after onboarding, graduate development, induction, and recruitment. And Cheryl's role is specifically focused on providing a product, platform product they've launched called Graduate Passport into large corporate businesses in Australasia. And so through Fusion and Graduate Passport, Cheryl's got a fantastic digital learning onboarding approach, and we thought it'd be really interesting for you all to hear Cheryl share some of her practical insights about that. So without any further ado, I'd really like to welcome Cheryl on board and hand over to Cheryl. Hello, Cheryl.
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much. That was a lovely introduction. And yeah, this is quite a rapid briefing. While I'm introducing, I'll switch over to my presentation here. And I'll give you a little bit of context around what I'll be talking about. So we do run a portal called Graduate Passport, which is quite a specific audience. And I'll outline a little bit about who that audience is and how we serve that audience on behalf of large corporate clients in Australia and moving into Asia recently as well. So where I'll start is this fact here, that recruiting is expensive. So what I've outlined here is just, and you can't read the detail, but basically just that, yeah, there's a lot of steps that we go through, large corporates go through in order to recruit the best graduates that come out of universities each year. And it starts with, usually an online or digital application process and sifts and sorts down through these steps until we finally make offers to the best, the cream of the crop. So recruiting is expensive, which means that onboarding is important. So here's a fact. I don't know in your part of the world if this is similar, but for graduates in Australia, the gap of time between when they accept an offer with an organisation and when they commence employment can be up to 9 months. It's because there is a large campaign that a corporate runs to go out into the universities to market themselves as an employer of choice and to go through this process of recruiting the best graduates. One of the issues then is retention. So how do we retain those graduates? Once we've picked the cream of the crop and we've made offers to them and they've accepted those offers, then how do we retain them in that 9-month period? Now, it's not always 9 months. Sometimes it's 3 or 6 months, different lengths of time depending on the organisation. But basically there is that gap between accepting the offer and then them coming into and starting on their first day in the organisation. This retention really is key to realising the return on investment that you've made in recruiting through that recruitment process. So what I'm about to show you is a digital solution that is very engaging and that has been really well received by graduates and is very much appreciated by our clients, which are these large corporates. Let me just give you a bit of a picture. If you don't work with graduates, and I've only started working with graduates recently, but basically, they're coming out of university, they're degree qualified, they're quite disciplined in a lot of cases. But this is an interesting one here, that they are technically raw. So technically raw, they don't know a lot about the organisation or the role. They're academically trained at that stage. So they're ready for a real job over here. They have certain expectations of what's going to happen. They certainly have high expectations of the organisation to provide them a career path and to give them a level of development that suits their needs. They expect to be the potential future leaders of organisations in many cases, and they are potential talent. So it's an investment in both parts, isn't it? David's just put something funny in the chat panel. Isn't it ironic that the audio from Australia is better? The air is clearer here. Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit Aussie and a bit biased. So yeah, feel free to communicate with me in the chat panel throughout. I like to watch the chat panel. It's my feel on the pulse that you're out there and that you're finding what we're talking about interesting. So thanks for that comment, David. So yeah, here come our graduates into the organisation. We've spent a lot of money recruiting them. We've got a long gap between when we can get face to face with them. And by the way, in that 3, 6, 9 months, those graduates are doing things. They're either still at university, some of them may be travelling. If they've come to our country from overseas to study and to work, then they may have gone back home for a period of time. They've got lots going on in their lives, and we need to try and maintain some sort of connection and even warm up that connection prior to them coming on board and joining the organisation. So here's some of the things that we do. This is a screenshot from the portal. Very shortly, I'll take you live into the portal. We'll give that a go via the magic of the webinar, so you can have a look at a few things live. But what I'm going to show you just for now is some screenshots of how we set up the portal. So you can see there's a carousel which has a number of modules here that we can deploy to the graduates. And we simply sign them up. The beauty of this is that they don't have to be on board the IT network of the organisation that we're working for. They can use their Hotmail or their Yahoo email address to access this portal because it is cloud-based, web-based, and they can access it from any sort of device they've got, whether it be computer, laptop, tablet, mobile, anything. So they can log in and we can start to engage them with some onboarding information with some things to help them. So successful transitions is one of our most popular modules that we put out there into graduates. As it says over here, many graduates are undertaking a major transition from study into full-time work. Not all of our graduates. Some of our graduates are actually mature age, so they may be undergoing career change. They might have been doing a certain career and studying for their next career and making a transition that way. But either way, we've got a great set of resources that we've been able to curate on the portal. We're using a vLearning Solutions portal. That's why Mark's invited me along to talk. So, you know, we're pulling in expert videos, you know, tips and things that we've curated, things that we've created ourselves. So some of this IP is ours, some of things that we've created from the World Wide Web and drawn in. So really a selection of great resources that we can deploy. And then we can actually watch from the back end of the portal, we can watch the behavior, we can watch what are the most successful, the most popular resources that these new recruits are accessing as they think about and start to transition and start to get a feel for the organisation and the development they're getting. So this is about engaging and retaining them immediately prior to joining the organisation. So here's another example of a module where there's this guy, Sean Aker. I don't know if you know him, but he's very popular in how he talks about the happy secret to better work. So he talks about working life and creating habits that create happiness around your working life, work-life balance kind of things. Now, it would be very expensive for us to get Sean Aker face-to-face or to have him even join a live webinar for us. But through the portal, we can curate some of the TEDx talks that he's completed, and we can deploy some of the resources that he has created and spread some of this goodness. Start to use expert information like this to put out to our graduates to suggest that this is a good way to start thinking about creating the sort of rhythm of working life. And it shows that our organisation cares for bringing them on board and bringing them into a happy working life. So this is some of the sort of content that we use. This now is another area where, and this is where I'll take you very shortly live into the portal to show you how this works. What we like to do with our group of graduates now, organisations could, you know, recruit in a year as little as few as 5 or 6 graduates, or some of our larger clients recruit up to 300 graduates or so. Now, when graduates come on board, they're curious to know who their fellow graduates are. They're curious to become part of that cohort. But, you know, if we didn't have this digital platform, they wouldn't meet each other until they came together on the first day. And then that first day is such a rush of information and things to do. So we start to connect the graduates with each other as a cohort prior to onboarding. As I say, they have access to this portal prior to even having an email address at the organisation. They can use their own email address to come on board. So you should be looking at the portal now. You can see here this carousel that I was talking about, where we've got a range of things. And by the way, we can add these in stages, so they wouldn't necessarily get all the content. First up, we can add modules as those months tick by, as we count down towards actually inducting them and bringing them on board. So here's an example where we introduce them to the organisation. There's a video I can click on and watch there about, who is the organisation, our strategy, our high-level presentation. You can meet the graduate program manager lead. She's created a video for herself to introduce. A group discussion going on there as well. Come down here, and this is what I was showing you on the screenshot where we asked them to upload their videos, and these are then the graduates who have uploaded their videos. There we go. So one of the ways that we get them involved, so it's not all about pushing content to the audience, it is about getting them pulling as well, getting them to get involved and share something of themselves and start to engage. So what else? As we get closer, as we count down towards truly onboarding the graduates, getting towards induction day and certainly their first week, there's another set of content that then we can deploy. So all of this content can be loaded on the portal but remain hidden until we reveal it, until we reveal the modules as the time ticks down. So practical matters like where do we go on our first day, or where is the induction training being held for the first week. And so this is a widget that we use on the portal. It is simply a widget from Google which shows a Google map, and it's got full functionality where you can click on and get directions from where you are. So if you've ever seen that on a website, it's usually on the contact or where are we page. We use that similar Google widget where you can see the map of exactly where you're going. This is a funny one, what to wear, but believe it or not, graduates do get very self-conscious transitioning from university life into working life as to what's appropriate. I don't want to dress too formally, but I don't want to dress too casually, and I want to fit in with the organisation. So a little bit of advice there. It's one of our most frequently asked questions. We load up a video of the facilitator who will be running the first week of induction, once again, just to create that familiarity, that warmth, who you're meeting, and get a feel for each other. An agenda, what's happening during the week, the first week that you come into the organisation. Once again, get people a feel for what to expect. And a question and discussion forum is always helpful. So that's kind of content that's valuable, we've found very valuable to graduates for their first week as they come into an organisation. This is an example from our large insurance company, but as I say, we do this for a number of different organisations. And each organisation has their own preference for what sort of content and what sort of culture and feel they want to put out there, or what they want to do prior to onboarding. One of the things that can be very important for big companies is that graduates or new recruits understand the strategy and culture. It's one of the foundations or fundamentals. So rather than necessarily going through a lot of this sort of stuff on the first day, when people's heads are spinning with more practical matters anyway and meeting a big bunch of people, we put out a series of podcasts for this particular client, QBE. Podcasts around strategy and culture, people, SME, that's their small and medium enterprise businesses. So they've already got a range of materials that they've created for the market. These are not necessarily podcasts that they're creating for this specific audience, but it's created for the market, and we simply curate and load them onto the portal so that they're organised. They've been specially selected for this audience. And things like this, which is strategy on a page, should start to look familiar to the new recruits prior to them onboarding and coming into the organisation. So all sorts of stuff, as I say, to have them arriving thoughtfully prepared. And this audience typically are hungry and thirsty for information about the organisation they're joining, so that they feel like they can hit the ground running and make a good impression. This is an example from another client now, and this is more practical information. So this is probably the sort of information we would provide within the first week that they're attending. So things like, what does the graduate program overview look like for the whole year or 2 years or 3 years, whatever sort of size program they're running. What to expect in your career with the organisation that you're joining, and conversely, what's expected of you which is really something else that new recruits tend to tune in on. What's expected of me? What will I be doing? Rotations can be coordinated and booked and organised on the platform as well. So rotations being, you'll spend 6 months in this department, 6 months in another business unit somewhere else on from that. All of that can be explained, and indeed that can be booked. I'll show you mentor booking in a moment too, which is another fabulous way to get things organised digitally rather than having to do all these things manually. Site visits is relevant to this organisation. It's an engineering-based firm. A Day in the Life of Director is another program that they run that we can outline and get people booked on. And some organisations choose to do some webinars or virtual classrooms in those early days as well. It depends whether all of your recruits are joining in the same location or coming together in the same location for onboarding and induction, or whether in fact you've got a dispersed audience. Now, Australia's a pretty big country, and quite often we have graduates joining the organisation but in different parts of the country, and we don't always get the luxury of bringing them all into Sydney or Melbourne for training or for development or workshops. So we do run a lot of virtual classroom and webinar type of engagement, and all of that can be booked and managed on the portal. Just as you've joined this webinar tonight, you would have joined on a Join Now link in the portal. So all of that we manage quite easily as well. Now, this is what I was talking about, mentoring. Mentoring for new recruits, whether they be graduates or a different age bracket or different type of role, is really important in terms of integrating into the organisation. It's an on-the-job form of learning. So we've run some very successful mentoring programs through the portal where we can do things like outline, what is our mentoring model, what are the stages or phases that mentoring goes through, so providing that sort of pre-information, and then some testimonials or some quotes from different people in the organisation who have been mentors or been mentees. Once again, it's all this idea of providing information so that people feel comfortable and know what to expect. And this is then the more practical side, which is brilliant for training administrators or HR administrative people, is getting people to book digitally their mentoring session with their mentor. So, we've got some buttons here we can click on to select times and days and booking, and all of this is managed. As you can imagine, when you have a large cohort of people coming into an organisation in one go, like 200 or 300 graduates, it can become quite an administrative task to get them connected to who they need to connect to and get them into mentoring programs and sessions and so forth. So all of this can be made easy as well. Just remind you, if you've got any questions or comments at all, chuck them in the chat panel. I'm keeping an eye on it. So, thank you, David. David said we run induction for new starts every 2 weeks. Any tips on pre-boarding for multi-level groups from entry-level recruits to senior management recruits? I'm thinking, David, it depends on content. Entry-level recruits will have different fears, concerns, expectations to what senior managers may have, and may have done different levels of research and engagement prior to joining. So a senior manager, I imagine, goes through a very different recruitment process and speaks to different people before coming on board to an organisation rather than an entry-level person. So you do need to think about the content you're putting on the portal. The beauty of the portal that we're using, as I said, a vLearning Solutions portal, is you can have different segments. Like we run this graduate onboarding recruitment process for a number of different organisations in Australia and Asia. So those organisations don't see each other's content on the portal. We can kind of segment what they see, what different audiences see. So we can have different groups or cohorts going through, seeing different levels of information and engaging in different ways. So yeah, I hope that's a tip for you, David. It's a matter of thinking about, what is their content. And then I guess the other way that we've figured it out is the portal gives us a great level of reporting on learner behaviour. So we're actually watching how often people are logging in, what components they're accessing when they log in. We can get data on what are the most popular things that are clicked on, what people go back to a second and third and fourth time. That sort of data, as you get going and providing this kind of service, is just invaluable to understanding the audience and understanding what will work. And we can then go out to our clients and say, we know what works with the graduate cohort because we've proven that over running several programs and watching, the behaviours, the learner behaviours, what they click on, what they go back to, how long they spend in certain parts of the portal. That's brilliant. Melina, can you get a report on a specific single user activity? Yes, I can. I can drill right down to a single user and I can look at their specific times, dates, clicks, behaviors, the whole lot. So yeah, it's quite clever that way. Valuable information. From Mirth, I'm not sure how I say your name, Mirth. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing that. How would it work if an organisation has multiple offices with various induction programs? Would it be possible to separate these groups? Yes, it definitely would. So at the highest level on the portal, you can, like I say, create different programs and segment audiences. One audience goes into one program, another audience goes into another. An individual on the portal could be logged into any number of programs or just one program. So yeah, there's all sorts of combinations can be managed. Terrific. And then Myrtle, is it? Oh, lovely, Myrtle. Thank you, Myrtle, for letting me know how to say your name. When it comes to, Amy says, when it comes to the actual onboarding, how effective can digital learning be, and what do you think the ratio should be between instructor-led and digital in the onboarding? Good question, Amy. My experience tells me that prior to the people coming on board with you, prior to them coming on the payroll and paying them, you tend to get away with a lot of onboarding and engagement digital, because people tend to think that digital is in their own space and time, particularly if they're accessing it from their own device, particularly if that's a mobile device and they're on the move or overseas, like good old Vinny. We didn't get to see his video, but he was in Korea, still engaging with the portal. So I tend to say you can get away with a lot prior to paying people, employing them and paying them with digital. When it comes to asking them to come to face-to-face or instructor-led training, that's when they tend to have to be on the payroll, and there's all sorts of occupational health and safety issues that you've got to be, having them on board if you're going to get them to come to a venue for instructor-led. I don't know if that's the answer you're after, Amy, but it's one way we can distinguish. I think there's, with digital, I'm a big fan of digital learning, and I think there's a lot of very engaging ways that we can meet people, get them integrated with the organisation and give them a warm welcome. It doesn't all have to be face-to-face, even sessions like this. We're not doing two-way audio today because we do have a large number of people attending this session, which is great. But if we break it down to smaller groups, we can have two-way audio and quite intimate virtual classrooms and question and answers going on, even with senior executives. So another organisation, we get senior executives to present webinars and have discussion groups directly with the graduates if we break it down to smaller groups. Yeah, and John's got a good point too. Blend of ILT and digital can be used.
Cheryl, sorry, it's Mark here. Just I'm going to pop in because there's a second question from Mercer there, which actually was more related to the portal and integration there with other LMS. The question around Cornerstone on Demand, and just quickly to let you know that that's absolutely the case, that you can use the portal as an engagement wrapper, almost as a system for launching your programs, your blended learning programs, induction programs, and then directly integrate that in terms of training records and feeds automated through into your LMS. No problem at all.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, from the technical perspective, and thanks, Myrtle, for the question. I have needed to do this for a couple of our larger clients, integrate to their LMS, particularly once onboarding. So I've had organisations where their LMS is internal, doesn't go through the cloud, but we've used the portal to bridge that gap before onboarding, and then once we have the recruits on board on the network with organisational email addresses, then we integrate with the LMS. So it can be a staged approach as well. But yeah, thanks for answering that one, Mark. It's completely possible. So this last slide here, just outlining another thought or idea on content for onboarding, and this is probably more after induction. So this is in the second, third, fourth week kind of stage. We've found that organisations want their new recruits to understand stakeholders and the internal and external environment, because as soon as our new recruits can get a grip on this, they can understand how they can create an impact and what is appropriate influence they can apply on all of these internal and external stakeholders. So one of the groovy things we've found is this app. It's a stakeholder analysis interactive screen app, and it's available, and we have integrated this with the portal. So there's many apps and tools out there that you see that you think, wow, that's really groovy, but you don't want to have to send people off in all directions or send them a link and then they don't access it or they can't remember where to find it or lose the link. To be able to integrate these great apps that you find into the one place in the portal, then your audience knows they just come back to the portal and that's their gateway to all of the great stuff that you've offered them, rather than, like I say, it being fragmented, them having to log on to several different systems and so forth. So that's another advantage that we've built in, being able to integrate all of these great things, and like I say, across many sorts of devices. So that's it in a nutshell, a bit of a whirlwind tour of what we're doing onboarding using digital platforms. But as you can see, not all digital is impersonal. You can make it quite personal and really warm it up.